Introductory words. We're going to switch to English now for the panel discussion. Welcome to everyone online as well. We have some people watching via Zoom. My name is Sebastian Hoffmann. I work here for the ITI Germany as a project coordinator for the consultation service of the aforementioned Touring Artist project. Touring Artist is the German mobility information point, so we provide free information and advice on the kind of, I always say, boring aspects of international mobility, but sometimes they're very exciting. But the administrative bureaucratic elements such as visas, international taxation, customs, and so forth. So we're kind of the workers on the ground. We try to help artists, cultural professionals, and organizations with realizing international cooperation, making it possible in the first place, so to say. Every year we provide about 1,300, 1,400 consultations, and it's all free. So if you need any help, get in touch anytime. We have a website which is also available in English with a lot of information. And I also already want to mention that we're not alone in this work. There are other mobility information points in other countries, and we work together very closely under the umbrella or under a working group of On the Move, the organization that is represented by Marie Le Sourd tonight. So yeah, there's 10 other countries that also have a mobility information point with information kind of particular to that country. So in this panel, which is going to be quite short, we don't really have so much time, but there's going to be, I think, drinks and food as well later. We're going to talk about a kind of particular issue that it has kind of become one of the most, or has always been kind of the most important issue when it comes to international cooperation. And that's kind of making the physical or geographical movements possible in the first place. And that's the issue of visas. So with me here are two, I would say, experts on the topic of visas. We have Temitayo Oni of the Spree Park residency program, a fairly new residence program, I think since 2024. Here, kind of around the corner in Treptower Park, that is kind of dedicated to inviting international artists from different sectors, right? And then we have Marie Le Sourd, Secretary General of On the Move, an organization, a membership organization that the IGBK, the International Association of Art, the ITI, and a lot of other organizations are members of. And Marie is also the co-author, together with Rana Yazagi, of a chapter in the report that was mentioned before, Reshaping Policies for Creativity. You co-wrote the chapter, The Shifting Borders of Cultural Mobility, which I would say is a kind of reality check, right, on the 2005 convention. So today, I think we want to kind of talk about your experiences on obstacles of cultural mobility. And I think I would like to start with you, if that's okay, because it's such a concrete case. And it was also kind of funny, because I think the first time we met was us actually during a consultation, because you got in touch with us, because you had a visa issue. Can you talk a little bit more about what that issue was and how you kind of dealt with it?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me, first of all. And yeah, I think the topic of the visa, especially since last year, became quite a recurrent issue within the residency program. So just to frame it a bit, we offer, or we used to offer from 2024 to 2025, a residency program for artist collectives, interdisciplinary working from everywhere around the world. And now we restructured the program a bit, so now it's not aimed at collectives anymore, but individual artists, and we have cooperations with other partner institutions. But at that time, specific case of this collective group where I've reached out to you, was the case, a collective coming from India, collective of 4. So they, we prepared all the documents, invitation letter, all the necessary documents. It was a big file of different documents for artists applying for the same, exactly the same residency altogether. And 2 of them received the visa, and 2 of them got the visa denied, with the justification that it was unclear whether they were planning on remaining in Germany or if they were going to leave. So we redid the whole process. We provided proof that they have lives that they want to get back to and have no intention whatsoever in remaining. It got declined for a second time. The overall mood within the collective, of course, shifted as well. It was a lot of uncertainty. It was a lot of demotivation in general. But I think as working in this case as a collective, I think there was the advantage that between them, they also motivated each other. There was just so much that us as the institution could do, but still we decided we are going to pursue the process, the residency at that point had already begun, so we tried to restructure it in a way where they could still partake, and yeah, just rethinking the residency and providing the support that we could. And ultimately, we were lucky enough that by reaching out to organizations such as Touring Artists, but also by getting in touch with the Goethe-Institut in Mumbai and being able to speak with ultimately with the ambassador somewhere in Mumbai, the documents got through and they got approved with the exact same documents that got handed in the first time, but the third time it worked out. So yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much for sharing this kind of very concrete example. Marie, you wrote or you co-wrote the report. Can you maybe give us like a very short summary of the kind of trends that you see in this kind of increasing complexity of the world of cultural mobility? I mean, if you look at maybe like 20, 25 years ago, cultural mobility had, I think, a different definition. It was more like an artist goes to perform in another country or has an exhibition in another country, but now we're seeing a lot like a kind of differentiation of mobility. We have digital mobility, we have within country mobility, region to region mobility, and also like how does maybe her story resonate with certain trends that you see?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much once again for the invitation. So I had the pleasure to co-write the chapter, not the whole report. Thank you for this, because there are different chapters on different topics, and already one chapter, it's a huge, I mean, luckily we were 2. I joined Hana a bit later, Hana Yasaji. The title of the chapter is called The Shifting Borders of Cultural Mobility, because indeed we wanted to illustrate the complexity and the different realities behind this, concept of the mobility of artists and cultural professionals. And we started this article by a quote by Heba Hagefeder, that is, she's based now in Switzerland, but she's from Lebanon. And when I asked her a few years ago about, why it's important to be in mobility, I mean, cross-border mobility, and she replied, we don't have any other choice than to be international. And I think this quote reflects very much the different motivation and needs behind this question of mobility of artists and cultural professionals. As you say, mobility in an ideal world should be part of the professional trajectory of artists and cultural professionals, whatever the domain in which they are evolving, in order to network, develop projects, develop touring, be part of residency program, etc. But for many artists, and maybe for an increasing number of artists and cultural professionals, mobility comes out from a necessity. Very often also an economic necessity. Somehow the fact of being in mobility is to repair what you don't have in your own context. And sometimes, or very often, it can concern the whole value chain of the cultural process, from training to co-production to touring to documentation, etc. And after, unfortunately as well, when we see the context, the world context, there is also the extreme case, which are on the increase as well, of forced mobility that is imposed on people because of condition of war, political oppression that artists and cultural professionals are facing. So this is also these different realities behind mobility patterns that we wanted also to highlight in this report, based also, I mean, just also to give a little bit of context, these reports are based on the report, and the different chapters are based on the reports that are shared by the different states or parties that ratify the convention. So we base very much our narrative, our writing and research based on the very detailed report, sometimes not so much detailed report, and after we try as well to complement that with other type of report that can be also through the MIPS and through the mobility and also through the numerous report by On the Move. A few trends, definitely the question of visa. I mean, this is, yeah, this is an urgent situation, I would like to say right now. This is very interesting what you say as well, through this experience that eventually you feel that it has become more and more a pressing issue also in your life as a manager of artist residency program. Also, when you say, you know, the mood shifted, also part of the collective. You got rejected once. I mean, 2 out of 4 at the beginning. Yeah, yeah, and so what we wanted also to highlight in this report is that beyond the you know, economic form of impact that you can lose if your visa is rejected, beyond the lack of visibility that you have in the other country, beyond the fact that you will miss networking opportunities because a residency usually is also a way to connect to other contexts as well, there is this huge negative impact on the mental health and well-being of artists and cultural professionals that really directly, as human beings, are rejected, even though they are at the same time invited by organizations. And I think this negative impact is also on you and people like you that host as well and want to invite. So we wanted also to express this human aspect as well, which is more and more felt, of course, by the sector, and which also push many more artists to say, right now, very sorry, if I am invited by this or that country, I will not go, because I don't want to go through this process that is not, you know, based on human dignity, basically. Yeah. And the last point I would like to share about visa, based on the report by the states and the parties that signed the convention, so from the global north or the global south countries, so in the UNESCO vocabulary is like developed and developing country. When it comes to the visa, 38% of country in the global north implemented new form of visa facilitation with regard to artists from the global south, which is much lower than the average percentage of the other country. So it shows as well there is much less an engagement, which also is in contradiction with the ratification of the convention, and particularly the Article 16 on preferential treatment, that where, you know, states should really, and it's not should, they shall, as much as possible, implement legal instrument, fiscal instrument, policies in order to facilitate the access not only of artists and cultural professionals, but also of cultural goods from developing country to developed country. So there is really a huge issue here, and we have seen this article, in fact, was written about 1 year ago, and that the situation, I mean, I can give the example later if needed, of France, has really deteriorated. Yeah. sorry, after there are some solutions, but the situation in the visa issue is really, really worrying, particularly considering the world context.
Yeah, I can also share that I was at a Music Board Berlin yesterday, the city of Berlin's funding body for like an internal meeting, and there was also like just another story of a South African artist who didn't get the Schengen visa. So, but I wanted to maybe touch a little bit more on the topic that Marie kind of touched on, the kind of mental health aspect, because I feel like that's not often recognized or not often so much seen in like official reports. I mean, you on the Move published a report regarding visa and mobility from African countries where that aspect is actually very present. But if you would like to maybe say just a few more words on how it felt for the artists as well, especially regarding the seemingly arbitrary kind of to get it, to don't get it.
Yes, so I think the overall, I think already the overall experience for the artists, at least that we and I work with, is this sense of overall uncertainty that the profession that they do is bound to a lot of waiting, of last-minute plans, of waiting for the visa, making last-minute adjustments. I think this is. It's just underlying tension and stress that builds up. I think in this particular case, of course, it was very upsetting. So after the residency, we have we always have just some feedback conversations, and this was really something that tainted the experience for them. Not only did it cut short the residency experience, but also it just gave them a sense of not embracing what they were offered because they felt inadequate somehow suddenly. But I think it's also two sides, because also the fact that as an institution or as a civil society organization or whatnot, you step in and suddenly take over roles because there is gaps, is for the artist, a lot of stress and simply unhealthy for the mental health, really. But also, I think the opposite side is the struggle of how to navigate that situation and taking on many roles that. Because there is a gap, there is a lack of something that you step in, so it becomes a very personal experience, and suddenly you're not just behind a computer across the world, but you create this very close, very emotional relationship as well throughout the process, and it's quite draining for every party involved.
Right. I would also like to just add one factor that's also very draining for a different target group, because we also advise with the project touring artists long-term mobility. So artists from particularly non-EU countries who move to Berlin. And of course, the local immigration office is also a place of fear and not of welcome. Things are changing for the better a little bit in Berlin, so I also want to give credit to where credit is due with digitalization especially. But kind of again looking at mobility in all its facets, it's not just temporary mobility, it's also long-term mobility or mobility of displaced persons or artists at risk. Marie, I wanted to get back to you because you already mentioned France. And I think France is interesting because there's a very kind of special and unique project that has been trying to solve visa issues, especially or only Schengen visa issues, the Comité Visa Artiste. So I just wanted to quickly introduce it before you can say what the latest developments are, so to say. So the Comité Visa Artiste is a kind of committee, a kind of clearing organization or structure that tries to solve rejections of Schengen visas. And the unique feature of the structure is that it doesn't only involve civil society, but also ministries. Yeah, so the responsible ministries in France are involved. And if there is a visa rejection, correct me if I'm wrong, this committee can be kind of involved to try to solve it. And you have the latest numbers.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. And indeed, I think the Comité Visa Artist also is one good case practice, like the mobility info point, by the way, that are very often mentioned in this UNESCO report for the past edition as well, since the past edition as well, or in some European Parliament resolution as well. So what is interesting also with the Comité Visa Artist is that it was set up by, I would say, a civil society organization, which is a network Zone Franche, that is a network that works more on world music, but when they set up also, now the Comité Visa is also connected to other disciplines as well. So they have this role of also of monitoring visa process, and eventually as well have this red line, you know, like when there are like some you know, issue related to potential visa rejection. Right now, I mean, the Comité Visa Artist is doing also like some, based on this data collection, they have been noticing that for the past 2 years, the situation has been very much deteriorating. Before 2022, they could solve about 70%, 70% of the cases, so which could be better, but which is already quite good. I mean, we have to also to be fair that sometimes some dossiers for visa application are not also, you know, do not fulfill all the criteria. But since 2022, the situation has been deteriorating, and right now it's more like less than 40% that they can solve in terms of visa process. And what is also very challenging is that this mechanism, which is very interesting also, like to have regular meeting with representatives from the Ministry of Culture. Of course, the Ministry of Culture is very supported. They also support On the Move, Mobilität, which is the equivalent of touring artists in France. Representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Interior Affairs. The Ministry of Interior Affairs has not been very active, to remain very diplomatic here for the past years. And there is also less engagement at the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this is a true challenge, because one of the recommendations that is often given also in this UNESCO report for this edition, but also for the past edition, is that we won't find any solution if there is not this interministerial, you know, connection, discussion, in collaboration as well with representatives of civil society organizations that know as well the sector, that know as well the specific working condition of artists and cultural professionals. Because what artists and cultural professionals face in terms of visa process, other citizens can face that, you know, the delay, the problem of getting an appointment, you know, all these, you know, the additional costs when you have to go through an external agency related to the consulate and everything. But let's say that in a way, unfortunately, they tick a bit all the boxes, you know. Most of the artists or a majority of artists and cultural professionals are freelancers, so they don't have regular income. The income can be also discontinued, so you don't have like a regular salary document and contract as well. The invitation can be a bit last minute as well, because the festival just got their, you know, subsidy to invite the artist. So all these questions should be taken into consideration, hence this a really important need of coordination at various levels of competency. So that's why now we are indeed in France, I mean particularly the Comité Visa Artist, but we look at it also very closely in a very, in a moment which is quite critical also to look at, you know, the near future. Yeah.
You also kind of mentioned this kind of problem of making maybe embassies or consulates understand the working conditions of artists. In many cases, artists kind of don't really fit the mold of certain categories. On the Move also published a document quite recently available in French, English, and also soon in German, which is the kind of lexicon for people working at embassies, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, indeed. So this is called the lexicon in relation with cultural mobility, and we produce it in partnership with Pearl, which is the European network for employer in the performing arts field in Europe, Africalia and Mobiculture, and the idea is to have to try to demystify somehow the jargon of the arts and cultural sector to people that don't really know our sector. Like for us, when we talk to sometimes with a consul or when we talk about legal and administrative framework, we don't always, I mean, you feel very comfortable, but personally, I don't feel always very comfortable. So we have this lexicon where we explain, you know, in simple words, what is an artist and cultural professional, because not only also to go beyond the image of what you think an artist is. It can be, of course, an artist, musician, part of a band, but it can be also an artist that go for a residency, a research process-based residency. You know, what does it mean for somebody working in a consulate, for instance? So we explain as well the term of artist residency, because of course residency doesn't, you know, mean the same in a consulate environment. And we try as well to explain the specific working condition of artists and cultural professionals and the fact that they cannot always deliver the type of documentation that is needed, but that other type of documentation like you know, letter of invitation, contract by the festival or residency organization can be sufficient proof also to invite these artists. So, and I have to add also that thanks to our Czech mobility info point, the lexicon will be also available in Czech. So the idea that it's also to use it as a tool for training and information, you know, particularly at the level of consulate and people working in relation with visa process.
I like that the first chapter in that lexicon is just artist. What is an artist? Well, let's definitely hope that some of the consulate workers read it or that it reaches them. I wanted to go a little bit maybe further in this kind of issue, what is an artist or who decides who is an artist? Because in the chapter that you co-wrote, there's also a quite interesting part that describes some countries who have started to kind of classify artists, maybe well-meaning, because then, you know, from a visa perspective, you could argue, you know, if the country classifies this person as an artist, maybe the consulates believe that they are an artist. But you also kind of showed a few possible pitfalls. Can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, there are some examples in this chapter of some country, particularly on the African continent, that so some government, Ministry of Culture or other related also federation try to find solution also basically to facilitate access to visa and to mobility. So they try also like to have this register, national register of artists and cultural professionals in order as well somehow to facilitate access to a visa process. This could be a good idea. However, one of the risks, big risk, would be that this process would make as if this organization would be a bit like gatekeeper of who is an artist and who is not. And we can also easily imagine that some of the artists that we want to invite may not be in this listing, so what happened in that case? And after, at the end of the day, it relates also to the overall question of the status of the artist and how to define, you know, the artistic process. So it could be an interesting idea, but, you know, in fact, this could be an interesting idea, make me think of another interesting idea that we sometimes hear, like we should have a visa for artists. And here we have the same question. Who is there to decide who is an artist or not? And we heard many stories as well in some interview that some artists were having in order to go through the visa process. Is like, oh, you mentioned that you are a dancer, so prove me that you are a dancer. So it's also in this situation of really loss of human dignity, this is really bad example, but we have been collecting some of this example. So yeah, there is really this big risk, I mean, to say the least.
We don't really have so much time, but I have so many more questions for you. I wanted to touch maybe on one more subject that's also kind of part of the report, and then maybe go back to you on a maybe more hopeful note or with some recommendations, what could be done. Another, I think, really fascinating aspect, because when we talk about visas, we always kind of imply this north-south mobility. Like the people from the so-called south want to go to the so-called north, and the so-called north doesn't give them the visa. But there's also an increasing south-to-south or so-called south-to-so-called south mobility. And I think that you have also really, really interesting points in the chapter, not only on visa issues from south to south countries, but also on other very kind of technical difficulties when it comes to transportation. Because within the southern hemisphere, there's often no direct flights between neighboring countries. So if you want to go from country A to country B, you sometimes have to reroute through Rome, and then you need an airport transit visa to go to Italy in some cases. Or I think in the Caribbean as well, airfares, some of the most expensive in the world. So maybe just a few points on that, because we want to make the picture a little bigger.
Yeah, and on a positive note, indeed, what we have been observing in the past years, in the past 4 years, there have been like more south-to-south mobility type of funding opportunities. So as you mentioned, there is this more recent funding organization, private funding organization called the Caribbean Cultural Fund that supports either project in the Caribbean, but also like mobility-related type of project. You have also the Aleveni Mobility Fund that is coordinated by the Commission of the Indian Ocean with the support of the French Agency for Development, so that connect Comores Island, Mauritius, Seychelles, Madagascar, and Mozambique. And indeed, I mean, this is very interesting. The one Aleveni as well, what they try to focus also is on the cross-border, cross-sea, also ocean mobility, also focusing on female artists and creative practitioners. However, yes, there are also visa issue in this south-to-south mobility. I mean, this is not only a problem in relation with the global north country. And indeed, one of the key obstacles is the price of the airline. I mean, one of the most expensive flight, I think, in the Indian Ocean is between Mauritius and Réunion Island, for instance. In the Caribbean, as you said, this is also extremely expensive. And we wrote that 1 year ago, and now we see the increase. So, but still, this is very interesting to see that there is a need also to connect regionally, but somehow the airline routes are still very much connected also to some global north country. So, yeah.
What can we do? Or what would you need? What would be your recommendation, especially also considering the involvement of civil society organizations?
I think ultimately there is politically structural gap that in a way is, as civil society organizations, we act as mediators, as translators, as filling the gap for something that is yeah, that is just not functioning. That is in decline. I think the general geopolitical situation is just right now at it seems not so hopeful as the current world situation. But I think sometimes to kind of get perspective from the bigger picture into just narrowing it down into your immediate circle, your immediate reality, into what we can do as institutions, civil society organizations, is having exchanges like these and connecting and creating networks and having partnering up and sharing knowledge and offering also these artists support in this way to connect themselves and to find solution to these issues. Still, I think it's not a sustainable, long-lasting perhaps solution. I think there needs to be some structural shifts that need to happen. But I think as of that, I think this is a real positive that has come out of it. I think ultimately as well sometimes to shift the focus on really this very humane interaction, these one-on-one relationships and just outside of these preset structures and just engaging with the human. And I think that is definitely very underestimated, I think.
I think one aspect that I found really interesting in the discussion we had before this talk was that I think you, Marie, said that 20 years ago, or 21 years ago, when the convention was ratified, there were actually not so many civil society organizations dedicated to the topic of cultural mobility. And now we have a fantastic network with On the Move. We have 11 mobility information point. We have 1 Comité Visa artist. There should be more, right? What would be your recommendations?
Yeah, there should be definitely more. Definitely more mobility info point. We need much more mobility info point, particularly at the EU level, in relation also with Schengen countries. So here, really, the support should come from national government, either through existing organizations, like it was the case in Germany, or through new form of association, like in France. There are different models. We have experience as well in relation to that. We have also much more networks that are also sensitized on this question as well. We still need to continue, particularly now, also with the new current negotiation for the next multi-financial program at the EU level. We still need to continue to talk about that, to keep this international cultural relation really nourished at this level. And maybe a last point, as I mentioned on this visa issue, the question is very urgent. I am wondering whether there should be also a need to have some, at the beginning, maybe informal discussion at governmental level with some civil society organization in a trustful environment with a few countries that try to act on this question. Of course, it depends on the ministry, but to have some conversation, because as you say, we need to continue that, because in some contexts we feel a bit stuck, and I guess this is maybe the right moment to. We have enough data, we have enough statistics, we know where the problems are. I was reading again the report we did in 2012 that my colleague Elena De Federico wrote. This is the same issue, but they have been exacerbated. So we need really to find ways at multiple levels of competencies as well.
I also would like to open the floor for questions. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them also in the Zoom chat. If there are any, I think there's a question here. Do you want to just, I think it's okay without, or do you want to give her the mic maybe that you have? Perfect, yeah. So I think it's easier for our listeners online or viewers online.
Hello, my name is Erika Matsunami. I'm a Japanese, though I'm living in Berlin as artist. My question is about the visa. For example, even European, it's not easy to get a business visa in the USA. I mean, from not between the south and north, general for the artists, it's not easy to get the visa.
For the USA, you mean?
Yes,
No, yeah.
because from the south in Germany is quite higher situation. It's not bad because Germany has the artist visa.
No, yeah, not really. It's just
Yes.
it's called the
Yes,
artist visa.
but
I always
my
say.
question for the European community
Yeah.
is since 2 years changed culture industry, culture professional. This norm is really difficult for the artist because business way of the culture industry must really good condition of the higher salaries. Because of the money, it's not so easy for the artist, for dancer too.
Yeah, I think the US is one of the most restrictive,
Yes.
has one of the most restrictive visa policies for everyone, basically, because it's so expensive. Like the visa costs are kind of comprised of many different factors. Sometimes you need to hire a lawyer if you've never done it before, so it can be like $2,000-3,000 or so, even for like privileged EU citizens to go to the US. And it's kind of like a market protection as well, especially I think from the classical music sector, because they fear the professionalism of other artists. I think you had the next question here, and then.
I have actually 2 points I want to bring in. The one is about the relationship between the migration policy in Europe and the figures from the last years about the development of cultural mobility to Europe. I mean, we have a couple of countries who are selling their political goal to downsizing the migration rates. And I guess one of the side effects is that the relationship between migration policy and cultural mobility is that it somehow has a clear effect on the cultural mobility. But I guess it needs, from your observations or from the available statistics, really reliable figures to create a clear relationship, to use it as a political argument for this. So are there any attempts for that, or is this something which could be useful for recommendations and stuff like this? This is the first point. Second point is the risk balance between institutions and artists in visa applications. I guess there is still an imbalance between the possibilities of risk management in terms of denied visas. So an artist normally has to apply with remarkable and rising costs for a visa, and has to undergo a lot of direct and indirect costs, and normally these costs are not part of the budget lines of the inviting institutions.
Marie,
So if an artist don't get the visa, probably the institution has a gap in its program, and maybe it saves some money because they don't have to pay the hotel or even the salary or whatever. But the costs for denied visas are in too many cases still on the side of the individual artists, and he is definitely not backed in the same way like a public funded institution. So is this a point which, and therefore I guess this is so important to have the preferential treatment as a guiding principle for inviting institutions.
Marie, do you want to comment on the first question, and do you want to comment on the second question?
On your first question, I think to collect data on this is maybe a bit is quite challenging, but that's why I was mentioning that in a way we need to talk you know, like with representative from interior affairs, foreign affairs, culture, at the level of country, also at the level of the European Commission, let's say the DG Home, which is the equivalent of Ministry of Interior Affairs, even though they cannot make decision on behalf of the country, of course. But because what happened is that usually in relation with visa process and invitation of artists and cultural professionals, we have to put in the balance the migration policy of, and the risk of illegal immigration that is taken into consideration by country, the security risk, and at the same time, country work as well on their attractivity, you know, in order to attract students, researchers, artists, and so on. Right now, we can really see that the balance is going on one side, and you know, and I guess yeah, we really need to talk because it's too many cases. I mean, the statistics I was providing, for instance, for France, is speaking for itself. I mean, there are too many cases, and the situation is continuing to deteriorate. So, in order to try to find a way to focus once again on the specificity of the working condition of artists and cultural professionals. So I don't have a very clear answer on that, but in terms of data and statistics, but in terms of answer, there is definitely a moment where there is a need of meetings, because I mean, if I take the example of France, like right now it's stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, I must say I agree with you with the fact that the costs for declined visas are often not covered by the grant or the institutions, the hosting institutions, or at least ours we don't, and most of the ones that I know also don't, and I think it is a problem because the reality is there is a big inequality when it comes to mobility, and depending on the passport that you are applying with, you have better chances or worse chances, in the sense that you might get declination. So there is definitely this preset inequality that that already you can foresee, perhaps, that in which way it could be included within the overall offer for the residents. I'm unsure myself, but I do agree with the fact that if it's something that is a pattern or something that is already foreseeable, that it would already take some pressure off the artists to know that those costs don't lie with them. And the financial pressure is really big. I mean, with us, the third time they applied, all these times they had to pay for it themselves, and they were in a position where they could afford that economically. But that is not the case for a lot of people. So yeah.
Just to, you know, because you say that you could not cover the cost. And just to say that, unfortunately, this is a reality. We did this report that you mentioned on the question of the impact of international cultural mobility on the well-being and mental health of artists and cultural professionals. And we did a scanning of calls related to mobility funding from 2021 till 2024. Out of all these different calls, so it's on average 600 calls a year, only 2.5% of this call, or funding opportunities for residency, festival, and so on, include access cost. When I say access cost, this is very large. This can be visa support, also when visa applications are rejected. It can be for artist parents. It can be for displaced artists, for instance. It can be for the mobility of artists with disability. So it's definitely nothing. And there is definitely also a huge issue here on the financial and administrative burden also carried out by those artists. And not only the art, I mean, it's general, it's not only the artists from the global south in comparison to the global north, yeah.
Yeah, I also think that sometimes there is even more hidden costs, you know, when it comes to visa applications, not the visa cost in itself. I mean, comparably, the Schengen visa is actually quite cheap, you know, if you compare to like an American visa also. But in many cases, artists don't live in the capital. They live in rural areas. They have to travel to the consulate, to the embassy. They need travel costs, hotel costs. In extreme cases, there is no embassy, there is no consulate. So the artist needs to travel to another country to apply for the visa, and sometimes they need a visa for that country, and then they need to invent a reason why they need a visa to go to that country to apply for a visa. So these are real cases, you know, that we have encountered. I think we have to finish quite soon, so I just wanted to check in the room if there's another question. Last question from the room, and then we're going to look at the Zoom maybe.
Thank you. Hello, well, I'm Constanze from IGBK also, and I wanted to come back to the specific context that we're here in today with ITI and IGBK and German UNESCO-Commission working together on this event, because ITI and IGBK are both organizations that are very much historically rooted in UNESCO. For us, speaking for IGBK, I can say that this UNESCO partnership is really elementary. Elemental, is that the word? It's really a founding idea of us existing, and it is also in our work, everyday work these days as transnational organization in the arts. It is really the common ground for us to come together with artists from all over the world, because through this context we meet artists and cultural practitioners that want to engage, and that want to engage for cultural diversity and for the arts. And that's why I was so very pleased when I found out, Marie, that you were invited to be a co-writer of this specific chapter, as having been a partner from a totally different side already for 15, 20 years. So for me, there's kind of like a connection being done there. However, we know that UNESCO language is a very difficult language. It's very hard to understand for people like us, let's say, or maybe some. It's very, very far away. And I wanted to take up that because UNESCO also, and the whole transnational discourse, is very challenged these days. Isolationist tendencies are so strong. So maybe you can say some words about that. Maybe Marie, if you had an experience about the bureaucratic part and the very motivated part of, for instance, writing that chapter, your experience on that. And maybe it's also a question to you, Tayo. How can institutions like UNESCO come back to a strong link to the actual artistic work and life? Because we really, really need it, and it should not go away.
Did you want to?
Yeah, maybe I will
okay.
answer. We saw you, Christine, also.
Okay.
Yeah. So about the more like my experience into, and I think, yeah, there are also UNESCO representative here, and also maybe watching. So what I can say, I mean, for me, it's also quite more recent, I would say. I think this is the experience of co-writing this article with Rana was very enriching. Because in a way, it's, you know, the way the reports are done by the country are very different from the type of report that we can write or we can read. So it's also, you know, some form of categorization of the information that you have to go through. And what is interesting, and at least I would say that this is also the freedom that is given, is that we have to base our article, our chapter, on the report by the parties, by the states that ratify the convention. But at the same time, we have, of course, the freedom also to compare that kind of data with other type of data, including the one coming from civil society organization. And I think this is where maybe there is also a change compared with a few years ago, because now more and more organizations are working on the issue and are trying also to document in terms of visa obstacle, but also in terms of good practices as well that could be, you know, further developed and eventually be institutionalized. And a last point I wanted to say is that considering the world context today, I am not sure that a convention like the 2005 convention would, you know, would be given birth today. You know, it's quite an interesting reference document, particularly on the Article 16, but not only. So because at least we have, you know, also as representative of civil society organization, we have also somehow, you know, we can also relate to that kind of engagement that is also legally binding as far as the Article 16 on preferential treatment is concerned. Yeah, thank you.
So I think overall, I think the report, especially this specific chapter, is such an important topic and so relevant given the current situation, and obviously we have so many shared experience, everyone sitting here probably as well. So I think somehow itself, the general report of the UNESCO, and I think I wonder myself as well, it is, even though it is discussing in depth the experience of the artists, it is not directly catered to the artists or directed at the artists. And I think situations like these, such as having an open panel and inviting the people who live those experiences to join that conversation, because I think they probably are unaware of a lot of things that we have discussed, or a lot of civil society organizations, or you know, things that they could implement within their own practice and life as artists. So I think to, yes, somehow it feels very abstract, but to kind of bring in the experience into these experiences that are being written about, I think that is very important.
I see two other questions from the audience. I just wanted to check if it's okay if we can continue for a few more minutes from the organizer's perspective. Okay, so I think you were next.
Sorry. Yeah, very fast. My name is Christine Semba, and I've been director of the Comité Visa Artistes over 10 years ago. That's why. And okay, now I'm based in Berlin and working for WOMEX, so working also on very like north and south and international. So yeah, many things have been said, and unfortunately things are not going better. Maybe just 2 points I wanted to mention. One being, especially in the north-south relationship, this fear that the artists can stay and immigrate, when actually the best wish of 99% of those artists is just to be able to go wherever they want to work and go back home, bring income to their communities, get inspiration, and go whenever they can to work and do the work they have to do. And I've experienced few cases of artists where they had so big difficulties to get the visa that they told me, I don't go back home because I know it's the last time I will be able to enter Europe. So that's completely an absurdity of the thing. And yeah, that's just a little human side that I wanted to mention. And back then when I was working for Comité Visa Artistes, okay, we didn't have, and I think it's still not the case, the means to do more research on the also economical impact, because it's not just we are presenting artists, it is also this, but it is also a huge economic sector around that, and that's something which is for many of the politicians absolutely, I mean, for them it doesn't exist, and that's also something I wish sometimes to be able to say, hey, how many employment in Europe are linked, I mean, for Europeans or whoever, are linked to artist mobility? If artists cannot move, most of us probably don't have jobs, no? So, and so it was just 2 points.
Do you want to comment?
your first comment, I mean, both comments are extremely relevant. Your first comment made me think of one artist that was supported by the Roberto Cimetta Fund, so that works more on the Mediterranean region. And he said, for me, mobility, the fact of being in mobility is a way for me to stay home. This is exactly what you say. You go somewhere in order, also to get some form of income, connection, professional development that you cannot have in your local context as a way to reinvest and live in your own context, because this is where you want to be. So yeah, just wanted to share this one.
Yeah, maybe also from like the consultant's perspective, because the reason for not getting the visa, this kind of unwillingness or the uncertainty to return to the home country is definitely, or has become, number one in the last years. And I really feel that there is this kind of problem, like, that's kind of lost in translation. And I think this is exactly where maybe the lexicon or similar initiatives would be very, very useful, because most artists that we're talking about kind of have three red flags. They're young, they're freelancers, and they don't have kids. Yeah. So from the embassies or from the consulate kind of caseworkers' perspective, they don't really care that they're artists. For them, it's just like checkboxes: tick, 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 bad, bad, bad. So I think we usually then try to advise handing in additional paperwork to prove that the artist must return not necessarily to their home country, but to another non-Schengen country. Because they have a festival in London, they have an appearance in, somewhere in Asia, also, that then proves that that they have to go, that they have to leave the Schengen area at least. Yeah. So this would be like a little workaround. I think we have one last question from you. Yeah.
Hello. Hello. Hey, thank you first for the discussion. My name is Marilisa Stille. I'm an artist manager. I am wondering, because when you apply for a visa, normally you apply for a country, like for Germany, for Spain. And I'm wondering, because you spoke about the European level, if you have some kind of discussion, what is happening now at the, for example, with the European Union, with the European Parliament, if they're taking care also of artist mobility, because, for example, sometimes it's difficult if an artist had a tour in different countries, they have to apply for each visa in each country,
Yeah,
but if they're taking care of making mobility also in Europe more easier with the national countries.
I mean, if you need a Schengen visa, it is usually valid for the entire Schengen area if the tour is consecutive, if there's no interruptions between the stay in the Schengen area. So that's, in a way, like one of the biggest advantages of the Schengen area as well. And then the big question is always, where do you apply? And it's either the country where you'll spend the most days or the country that's your main destination. So, for example, the most important show, the most important festival, and so on. But then, if the stay is uninterrupted in the Schengen area, then you just need one Schengen visa. That's very good. But I think on a European level, I think we have this big problem that we have kind of two different sets of legislation. We have the Schengen Visa Code, which basically regulates entering the Schengen area in the first place. And then we also, when it comes to working as an artist, we have a lot of different legislations, because each country has its own rules. Each European Union or Schengen area country still has full independence, more or less, on labor market entry. So, and then of course a lot of countries say, well, for artists or cultural professionals, there are exemptions from a work permit. So you can do this on a standard Schengen visa without needing any extra permission to work. But other countries may be more restrictive. And that's maybe where you will actually need multiple visas. Germany and France are fairly flexible for guest performances. I think up to 90 days per 12-month period, you can just kind of do it without extra permission. But countries like Denmark, I think, are a lot more restrictive, because in Denmark you have to be the main act on the bill, not the support act. to be exempt from a Danish work permit, and you can only play about, I think, 7 shows per year. You know, of course, Denmark is a small country, yeah. But for theater or dance, you know, this could be problematic because you may have more than 7 shows or more than 7 performances. But maybe, Marie, do you want to add something on the EU level?
Recently, there was more like communication, voilà, a communication on the revised version of the Schengen visa. And yeah, for the moment it's also quite large, but what was interesting is that touring artists or artists in mobility were particularly mentioned. After this communication was also about the digital process of visa application that should be implemented from 2028, if I am not mistaken, but yeah, let's say how it goes. However, here also big point of warning, because you know it could help, but at the same time, can it be used as well, you know, as an additional check on some people coming from some country? So, but what I would like to add on a practical level, for instance, in terms of funding opportunities at a European level. So, you know, there is a Creative Europe program that covers the art and cultural sector in 41 countries now. And there is this mobility funding scheme that is called Culture Move Europe. And Tunisia is the only North African country that is part of Culture Move Europe. And, you know, it is, how to say, so at the same time, access costs here are included, so you can have 120 euro for your visa application, so which cover even a little bit more, you know, than the cost of the visa. But definitely, usually, you need to go like through an external agency that can, you know, increase the price. However, here we are in the tricky part, because when you make the application, for the visa, I mean, when there is a time frame problem, because when you make the application for the visa, you need to justify that you already bought the air ticket. But usually you have to wait for the answer from the funding organization, so for Culture Move Europe. So it's, you know, it's always this question of almost tailor-made type of approach in order to take into consideration the specific context in which artists and cultural professionals are evolving. Yeah.
Thanks so much. I think we're a bit over time now, but I hope it wasn't too long for you. There's going to be some catering, drinks, and food in the lobby. Or is there a question in the Zoom chat? No? Of course, there will be closing words as well. But I would like to thank Tayo and Marie for sharing your words of wisdom and your experiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you.
Das funktioniert das Mikro, ne? Genau, nur ganz kurz von mir zum Abschied, weil wir schon ein bisschen über der Zeit sind. Aber erstmal vielen, vielen Dank für alle, die hier sind, für alle, die online dabei waren, dass Sie mit uns diesen Welttag der kulturellen Vielfalt heute gefeiert haben, jetzt schon 25 Jahre alt. Da hat sich viel getan über die letzten Jahre. Und vielen, vielen Dank an das tolle Panel, an die super Moderation von dir, Sebastian, Tometayo, Marie, für die Einblicke, was sich tut, die Trends weltweit, aber auch was ganz konkret die Herausforderungen sind. Das war unglaublich informativ und hilfreich, gerade auch für unsere Arbeit. Wir haben das eben schon mal gehört. Das ist manchmal ein bisschen sperrig, woran wir arbeiten, die Texte. Auch dieser Weltbericht, ich kann sagen, die Übersetzung war nicht ganz einfach. Wir haben das aber mit den österreichischen Kollegen gemacht, weil wir es wichtig finden, dass die Ergebnisse, die wir international sehen, die zum Teil sehr unterschiedlich sind, aber die auch sehr verbindend sind, was die Herausforderungen sind von Digitalisierung. Klar, Mobilität haben wir heute besprochen, aber auch Förderprobleme und so weiter. Auch die positiven Entwicklungen, wir haben auch heute schon ein paar gute Beispiele gesehen, gerade die Langfassung, die fast 300 Seiten hat, da sind auch wirklich tolle Beispiele drin, die haben wir nicht alle in der Kurzfassung drin. Die liegt draußen, ich habe sie mitgebracht, druckfrisch. Sie sind die Ersten, ihr seid die Ersten, die sie lesen können. Wir hatten sie bisher nur online. Und vielleicht noch ganz kurz dazu, auch so wie wir dazu weiterarbeiten. Zum einen die wunderbare Partnerschaft mit ITI und IGBK, die jetzt schon über viele, viele Jahre uns begleiten, dabei diese Konvention in Deutschland umzusetzen und natürlich auch international. Aber wir als Deutsche Nationalkommission arbeiten dann natürlich vor allen Dingen auch daran, was wir hier in Deutschland noch zu tun ist. Mobilität ist ein Riesenthema und Vorzugsbehandlung, Artikel 16 wurde angesprochen. Das ist wirklich eine Verantwortung für uns als Land des globalen Nordens, da irgendwie Möglichkeiten zu schaffen, Vorzugsbehandlung zu gewährleisten für kulturtätige KünstlerInnen aus dem globalen Süden, und da ist noch ganz, ganz viel zu tun. Wir haben eine Initiative gegründet, Fair Culture, wo wir das versuchen, und wir haben eine Charta geschrieben mit internationalen ExpertInnen. Die liegt auch draußen, die hatten wir jetzt vorher noch nicht da liegen, aber vielleicht nehmen Sie die auch mit. Auch das ist wieder ein abstrakter Text, aber mit ganz, ganz vielen wichtigen Hinweisen, wie das passieren kann, wie der Kulturbereich fairer werden kann und gerade auch internationale Zusammenarbeit. Und dazu wollen wir im Herbst auch einen runden Tisch organisieren mit staatlichen Akteuren, aber auch mit der Zivilgesellschaft, wo auch hoffentlich möglichst viele von Ihnen mit dabei sind. Und auch so eine Einladung dazu. Wir haben immer in einer bundesweiten Koalition Kulturelle Vielfalt auch mit ITI und IGBK zusammengearbeitet, diese Konvention zu übersetzen und irgendwie in eine Sprache zu fassen, dass sie eben verstanden wird, auch von denen, die die Kultur gestalten. Und da lade ich Sie ein, wenn Sie Interesse haben, daran mit uns dran zu arbeiten, würden wir uns sehr, sehr freuen. Das war auch ein Anlass für diese Veranstaltung heute zum Welttag, und es freut mich sehr, dass wir das zusammen realisieren konnten. Ganz, ganz herzlichen Dank an Neserket, sorry, jetzt musste ich kurz nachdenken, für die tolle Performance. Die Würde des Menschen ist unantastbar. Das war wirklich sehr, sehr eindrücklich und ein ganz, ganz wichtiger Beginn für diese Veranstaltung. Und für alle, die jetzt hier sind im Raum, die Zoom-Teilnehmerinnen, vielen Dank, dass Sie dabei waren. Für alle anderen draußen haben wir ein kleines Buffet und freuen uns, wenn Sie noch mit uns informell ein bisschen ins Gespräch kommen zu der Konvention, zu diesem Weltbericht und zu Mobilität. Vielen Dank.